therapist here in New York City, and this is 4x4. 4 things every Enneagram 4 needs to know on a specific topic, given by a 4. I'm a 4. I suffer the pain with you all, and it has been torture at times, but it also has been great joy. Today we are going to talk about work, and this is part 2 of my 5-part series on work. This one's called Being Principled in Your Pickiness. The Enneagram teaches us that we are resistant to change at some level, and that we use our instincts to control our environment, to control the people and the space that we live in. And so there's a certain amount of control, though, that we do need. We do need to say no to things. We do need to put our stamp of approval on things and stake our claim and say, no, this is the way I want it. To be selective, discerning, resistant. Not all of that is bad. There's good resistance. Discerning is a great thing when we could say, no, I do not want this and I do want that. So we can spend a lifetime learning how to say no so that we can say yes well. So 4s, they have a penchant for wanting to start at the top. Take the escalator right up and not go through the steps. And that is one of the things that we have to reckon with, is that we have a muscular spirit. And our spirit often says, let's just go, let's drive, let's move, let's be aggressive. We often have to slow down, narrow our field of vision, and pick the things that are right for us. Now, if you were like me, as a 4, you might have felt alien in life, like you do not fit, that there is no place for you, that you are overwhelmed by your knowingness, that you know something, not everybody knows it, and you have a hard time explaining it. Us 4s have 1,000 different ways we want to explain ourselves, but also 1,000 different ways we want to explain the world. We want to kind of climb up into heaven, grab the things that we see real quickly, and sneak it out. Come back down, show people that. And that helps us know which direction to go in life. Like, what are the things, if we were in heaven, we would grab and bring down? And how do we build a life around those things that we love? Those things we're passionate about. And then sift out all of the other stuff. Graduate into maturity and be promoted based on what we deselect. Jerry Seinfeld says, find a torture in life that you are comfortable with and you will be okay. The torturous part for us at times is, how do we pick? Our emotions are so often raw and ripe and powerful, and we want it all. And how do we say no to a bunch of things so we could say yes to a couple? That's what I'm going to try to help with today. We are the standard bearers. We do blaze the trail at times. We are the pioneers. But we can get a late start because we're deselecting and we're taking a while deselecting so that we can select well. So if you are like me and you felt like this world just can't contain you at times, this one might be for you. And if you are a friend or a family of a 4 who's trying to figure them out, trying to figure out why their work can't be what it should be, and you see the potential in them, and they have just not narrowed down life enough to make those moves, this might be helpful to them. Maybe you could pass it on, or you can learn them a little bit better. So let's start with number 1. Have you ever felt like maybe a statue should be erected in your name, in your image? I don't know. I don't know if I have, but there is a part of me that feels like I'm pretty special and that people should commemorate me in some way. But it is not practical. I mean, statues in general aren't really all that practical. And who I think would have a real problem with statues being erected to anybody is an Enneagram 1. They're just too dogmatic. They have a certain entrenchment in perfectionism, and their standards are high, and they have a moral kind of stance on things, and they're rational for the most part. Their perfectionism can be irrational, but They are principled. They add form and order. They have a sense of mission. And so a statue to them would seem silly. Well, why would we spend time and money on a statue to anyone? But when we are at our healthiest fours, we look a little like a one. It's like an M&M. We have an outer coating of oneness. This is our true consolation. So part one is true consolation. There's a true consolation and a false consolation. True consolation is when we are in a good spot, when we feel secure, safe, secure, confident, we have a version of one going through our blood. When we are insecure, when we feel unstable, insecurity that might rock our boat, we can't stand in the middle of the boat and feel balanced, we look a little like a two. We might get codependent. We might look for somebody to take care of us, or we might look to take care of somebody else, to give ourselves worth, or to feel known and safe and secure and nurtured. But when we are in our one space, we aren't as overwhelmed. We give form to things like a one would, an order. Now, as fours, we have the goods. We are creative. We have a flair to us. Ones, not as much. But what we can take from them is form and order. When we feel out of control with our emotions, and we have that one blood running through us, we add form and order to our work. Balance. We are principled. We hold ourselves accountable, and we have a sense of mission. And this is the discipline that we need. So this is all about being principled in our pickiness, which means we have to be restrained for the long haul. And what do ones do well? They are restrained for the long haul. They produce, and they don't get overly consumed by their emotions in that. They let their values move them, not their emotion. We let our emotions move us. So while we can be very inspirational, they can be very disciplined. Now, God didn't create, I don't think, if there is a God, he did not create the artist to go unnoticed. Let's say that again. He did not create the artist to go unnoticed. Fours have a voice inside. Creative voice. There's things we know about love and life and what we're drawn to that we have to listen to. But we can get addicted to the search for this huge thing, this huge manifestation of the stuff we feel inside. And the one, they know that there is steps. Slow and steady wins the race. Now, for the negative part of a one, they can be perfectionists to an extreme. They can be critical and resentful because they have that hostile edge. They can be impatient in a different way than we can. Their standards might be too high in a different way than ours are. It's more to them about doing it right. To us, it's about the expression. Now, the interesting part in this is that when ones are destabilized, unhealthy, and disoriented, they look a little like us. So it's odd that it happens that way, that when they aren't in a good place, they look a little emotional, melancholy, self-destructive, overly subjective. But the beauty of them when they are in a good spot is that they are objective. They see from 10 feet up and look down and go, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. Let's get rid of this, let's pull that in. Where we are so subjective that it's hard for us to see past our own hand in front of us. So this is part one, right? So it's rationality, form, order, being balanced, taking the chaos and making sense of it so we can produce. We need to work, and our work is usually important. And I think there's an artist in all of us. I'm a therapist. It's not necessarily art per se, but there is an art to what I do. And probably whatever you do, there is an art to it. And you're not supposed to lose that. Not lose that inspiration, that joie de vivre, that passion, but also to put some form around it, some order around it, so that you can be centered, balanced, get the job done, and not be just swimming in the fantasy of this grand idea that you might not be able to make work because you did not go through the steps to get it done. All right, so true consolation. Be aware that when you are in a healthy place, you'll notice this, that stability's gravitating towards form, order, putting things in their place. And when you are in a false consolation spot, you are looking to get helped or to help to get your worth. And you might be clutching or grasping or being a little bit too needy in that. All right, let's go on to number 2. When you're thinking about being principled in pickiness, I want you to think a little bit about what are some special ways that you're picky? What are some special ways that you move in the world to define what you love, what you're into, and how you're going to spend time with that? I'm gonna give you one for myself in my life. This part 2 is called holding out. I hold out. It's one of my kind of special powers when it comes to being principled in pickiness. I can tolerate anticipation. I can say no to a lot of things and be in a place of liminality for a long period of time because I am just so set on a vision. Now, what is required of me there to actually pull in that one part, the Enneagram 1 part, is to be very deliberate about who I let into that process and how I utilize them. Because I am emotional as a 4, because my emotions can be erratic and I can be overly hyped or overly insecure, remember that teeter-totter of insecurity and confidence. I can be both to a high degree that could get in the way of being balanced, principled, and give form and order to things like the 1 does so well. So I have to elicit input from others. Hey, how are you seeing this? Is this too lofty of an idea? Do you think I could actually succeed in this area? And those people who I trust will either affirm that that dream, I can make my home there, or that the dream is too lofty, or these are the steps that you have to take, and these are the resistances that are going to come towards you. Because we don't live in the normal, us 4s. We live in the abnormal. And because we live in the abnormal, we could be somewhat disconnected from reality. So we need that taste of reality. That's that one part. Or it's the part that our friends and family have, where they see what would be attainable, while still giving us that unattainable accent that we have and saying, if anybody's going to do it, this person might, this 4 might. We are cursed by the gift of knowingness. And like I said in the beginning, we want to sneak up into heaven real quick. We don't want to live there yet because we don't want to die. But we want to get a little taste and pilfer, steal, sneak out the stuff that we liked really quick. Almost like a game show where you're just picking the stuff that you can pick real quick and then you take it to the cash register. Can't remember what that show is called, but Supermarket Sweep, was that it? I don't know. Anyway, whatever the show was, there was this speed, there was this time that you could go out into the supermarket, get the food. Hopefully it was at a high cost, so your value was high and you win and you go on a trip to Tahiti or something. In this case, we want to jump up into heaven, grab those things, come back down to show the world those. Now, it's romantic. We don't like stagnation and we don't like mediocrity. And usually the people in our lives know that. they wouldn't let us be mediocre if we wanted to. They see us actually as someone who does need to express that part of heaven or mysticism or the cool parts of nature that we get to express in our work. So we need those wisdom folks, those folks that know how to take the proper steps and don't get overly emotional in it. Those are the ones, or those are our friends who have that one stuff that they can give to us. Now, as you might know, I love Seinfeld. I love the show. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David, the co-writer of and co-creator of Seinfeld, his show. I love Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Now, Larry David once said, "Before Seinfeld, I was desperate, but I was particular." He knew that there was things he was willing to not give up on or not say yes to because it just didn't fit into who he was. Now, any interview I've heard with Jerry Seinfeld, it's similar, especially when they started Seinfeld. And what they did with Seinfeld is they wrote like the anti-establishment sitcom. What I mean by that is if you remember any of the sitcoms you saw in life in your past, when I was growing up, sitcoms were a big part of life. And whether that show was Home Improvement or Cheers or Friends, the main characters usually had the most chaos happening to them. And in the case of most sitcoms, the main character was a comedian in real life. And in the show, they kept on stumbling and fumbling. But Jerry said, no, I will be the stable force in this show. All the characters around me will have a bunch of chaos going on, but I will be even Steven. I will be that character who just is secure. In many ways, he is the Enneagram 1 in that show. And maybe in his real life. I'm not sure if he's a 1 or an 8. I think he's one of those two. I'll probably do a full episode on Jerry just to kind of come up with whether he's a 1 or an 8. But they resisted, both Larry and him resisted going the route others wanted them to go. They were picky. They were selective. They were resistant. But it wasn't in a way that devalued themselves. It definitely did devalue the show. And they were willing to let it go for the sake of something great. So that's our challenge. And we can, in this case, hold out. Hold out. Be resistant at times so that you get the best result, not just a result for the sake of a result. So let's go on to number 3. We're just going to piggyback a little bit. This is going to blur with number 2. And it actually is just on the heels of me talking about Seinfeld. If you know the show Curb Your Enthusiasm, maybe you haven't really thought of what that means. What does it look like to curb your enthusiasm? I'm going to give you a quick narrative here. If you guys have known me, you know that I use Rainer Maria Rilke quotes all the time. He is, to me, the classic poet writer for really emotional, turn of the century, early 1900s. He was doing a lot of his work. He wrote letters to a young poet. You might have read this book, Letters to a Young Poet. Literal letters he wrote to a young poet who was writing him, asking him questions about life. And he was just sharing how to be a good worker. Essentially, it's a high-level self-help book. Very short, very brief. But in many ways, he was helping that poet curb his enthusiasm. Now, Rilke was dating a woman who was an artist in her own right, and she had relationships with other famous men in Europe at the time. I believe she dated Nietzsche as well, but she later on in life was asked about Rilke, and in this correspondence back and forth with somebody else, she wrote this. It seems to me that the youth with his fragile exuberance is vanishing now, and the grown man is beginning to emerge with fewer words, but which have more to say. With fewer words, but which have more to say. When she was with this man early on in his life, his exuberance was just too high, too extreme. His emotions too extreme. His passion getting in the way. And if we know from the last episode, part 1, that Rodin told him to stop writing about love. Write about the normal things in life. And so what Paula Becker is saying here about Rilke is that he was curbing his enthusiasm. And he was then becoming the man he was supposed to be. More objective, more clear. That he was having a distance from himself. And this is what we have to do, is 4s have to have a distance from themselves. Pull back. Pull back. Even in this moment, as the New York sounds are playing in the background, there's a part of me that naturally wants to get a little emotional and do this all over. Restart. But can I just be balanced and practical in this moment? Wait for that beeping to stop. Take a breath and get grounded. Have a distance from myself. Say, maybe this is a good moment of teaching. Detachment. It's what I call high intentions, low attachment. High LA. If we can have very intentional desires, passions, plans, but low attachment to the results, we can curb our enthusiasm, detach a bit, have a healthy relationship with this thing we're trying to do. Again, this is what 1s do well. Clarity, values, reason, logic, distance from self, workable conclusions, form, objectivity. They tame the idealized version of what they want and settle on some realism. Now, we as 4s can only settle on so much realism. We have to have that flair. We have to have the inspiration. We have to live in the future a little bit, the future that's unavailable to us, our dreams. But our imagination can go too far and influence us to the negative. So we've got to balance that out. This is just building the scaffolding, guys. Building that scaffolding so we can deal with our impatience. We can deal with what many of us have as an Achilles heel, is that impatience. That it's the hardest thing is to wait for the appropriate time. The hardest thing is to wait for the appropriate time. You might start a project and 6 years later, 7 years later, it comes to fruition. There's this moment in The Defiant Ones on HBO. It's a docuseries, 4-part docuseries on Jimmy Iovine, who is this great producer, engineer of music, and Dr. Dre. I really recommend it. It's one of my favorite docuseries. Kind of goes through music from John Lennon to current. And these two created Beats, the headphones, and sold it to Apple for billions of dollars. Now, in this episode, I think it's like part 2 or part 3, Jimmy had signed No Doubt early on when they were very young, the band with Gwen Stefani. And Gwen is in this interview and she's saying, when she first met Jimmy, Jimmy said, in 6 years, you're going to have a great hit. And she thought in her head, in 6 years, I'm going to be barefoot and pregnant with my 3rd kid or 2nd kid. Like, that felt like too long to wait. Sometimes we have to curb our enthusiasm for the long haul. Now, she says that in the 6th year, they had their first hit. I've been working on a project for more than 6 years, and it hasn't come to fruition, hasn't landed with the right people, the right money. But I take heart there. Gwen had to wait, and so many great artists and great pieces of work had to wait and wait and wait, and intense amount of resistances against them. That they had to wait for the appropriate time. That they had to possess it, the project, and not let the project possess them. because we can live in the future to the point where it stops us from moving into the future. So my challenge to you guys is, can you wait for the appropriate time? Can you be patient? Can you live in liminality and wait for your goods to get better, like for you to develop, so you are ready for the project? That's my hope for you. Let's go on to part 4 and close this thing out. So as you might tell, I'm trying to piggyback. There's a lot of crossover in these. And part 4 is the namesake of this episode, being principled in your pickiness. I don't think I've ever told you, but I cut my own hair. Not bad, right? Pretty decent job. I've cut my own hair since I was 16. I may have had 1 or 2 people in all that time cut my hair. Why the hell am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I am principled in my pickiness. I know what I like. It's not that I wouldn't give that over to the right person. It's that I'm doing a pretty good job and I like to do it. And I know how to say no to other forms. This is a thing that we have in us fours. We're pretty good at saying no to a lot of things. And we can be obsessive, and that obsessiveness can work for us. It could be a honing skill, like, to satisfy what for us is great art, is great work, is something we could be passionate about. And Johnny Cash said, "I love to control the music." And he always, when he was working with, whether it was a record label or musicians, is how much freedom will I have to make whatever music I want? Great artists, I think, do this. And I mentioned it with Seinfeld and Larry David. That they know that their taste, their ability to deselect and select is paramount, should be predominant in the choices they make. That while they're not omniscient, they're not all powerful, they do need to get feedback. They can't go at it alone. And that they vacillate between idealization and devaluation. Like I said, that we are both confident and insecure in the same minute, and we're teeter-tottering all the time. All great work from 4s has that as a component. That these folks aren't overly defensive and can be very inclusive in the building of a project, in the building of their work. So in that sense, they do not mishandle their glory. You know, the greatest art requires the artist to go to hell. And if the greatest artists go to hell and come back, they are not going to easily give up their vision. Jerry and Larry worked painstakingly on their comedy sets, their stand-up. Over and over and over again, practicing, going to hell. Johnny Cash, over and over and over again, playing that song, getting it right, voice inflection, tone, rhythm. They go to hell. And so therefore they have a confidence in their ability to pick, ability to choose. We must have that. Now here's what I'm going to tell you to be wary of. One, I've said this before, I said it in part 1 of work. Compromise in the right circumstances. Do not compromise to make circumstances right. 2, we should want to go for the first thing before the second thing. Make sure the first thing doesn't succeed or is talked out of existence, because so many people think it is not the right choice. We will constantly look for plan B because plan A is taking too long. Be wary of plan B. Living in the disappointment of the future is living in plan B. You're expecting plan A not to work, even though it hasn't failed yet. Even for No Doubt or myself, Gwen Stefani, 6 years, still haven't made it. But as Teilhard de Chardin says, above all, trust in the slow work of God. Trust in the slow work of God. Powerful people, successful people have to be humbled. Otherwise, they will just be complete assholes. So you must be humble. What do I see as humility? Humility is being your true self. That might be wanting to be on a stage, wanting to get attention, wanting to act, wanting to sing, wanting to be noticed for the great gift that you have. That is not wrong if it is your true self. Humility comes from the word humus, dirt, soil. This is where we grow. This is where we are planted. And when we could be true to that soil and allow it to hold us, secure our roots, then we can get the job done. So as I always say at the end of these, in Rilke's words, everything is yet to be done. Everything. This might be the year that my project makes it. 7th year. Might never. Something else will reveal itself. So if you've enjoyed these, I hope you watch part 3. Subscribe if you can. Hit that little bell, and the bell will tell you when I put out new things. It'll go ding or something like that. And we'll see each other again. Have a good day, guys. Enjoy yourself. Later.